Ladies and gentlemen, my lovelies, welcome back to Love Chronicles with Coach John. As today we're diving deep into what makes love disintegrate. And we're gonna look at why do we find ourselves in situations where we wake up next to someone we hardly know anymore and we're wondering how we got there. And here's the question for you. Why do people who once loved each other deeply, they were ready to give their lives for each other, at some point decide to walk away? At what point does that connection snap? Does it happen all at once, or is it a slow, agonizing process? Now, if you're listening to this episode, the chances are that you've been there. And if you're in your 30s, 40s, I can bet my life on it that you've been there. And I can say that we all have. You've been in that moment when everything just falls apart and you only got nothing but questions. You have questioned why? What are the reasons couples break up? Why did she leave me? Why did he leave me? Why did this happen to me? I thought we were in love. I didn't even know what happened. So if you have these questions right now, or if you had these questions in the past, and if you didn't get the answer, well, that's what we're going to do today. Go grab your favorite drink. I got my coffee here, and we're going to look at a few reasons to why relationships break up, why marriages break up. So we're going to jump straight into it because time is money and time is valuable, and let's have a go at it. So what would be a first problem? I mean, what do you think could be a first reason in regard to why relationship break up? Is it sex? Because come on, sex is so important. It's so nice, isn't it? But there's so many arguments around it. Is it sex? Is it communication? Because we hear a lot about that online, don't we? Is it communication or the lack thereof? Or is it something even deeper, more profound? Today, we're going to break it all down. And trust me, I think it's worth sticking around. So, one of the first things, right? We're going to jump straight into the first reason. And one of the first things that I found as a problem. So that's from speaking to people around me, from talking to clients, to speaking to being on groups, where people are trying to rebuild their lives after divorce, after breakups, and things like that. And one of the first thing that I noticed, and this I would call the biggest culprit, is uncommunicated expectations. I mean, it doesn't sound too dramatic. I mean, you're probably thinking of, sex or of big fights, big arguments, or cheating or anything like that. But I'm telling you, in my opinion, this is one of the biggest reasons in regard to why couples break up. As I said, it doesn't sound too dramatic, maybe heart-wrenching reason you would expect. But let me tell you, this is a silent killer in relationships. And here's the thing, my lovelies. We all come into relationships with a blueprint in our heads. We have a set of assumptions, if you will, and we expect our partner to know these things. So first, we come into a relationship, we have this blueprint, we have these expectations. We want them to act in a certain way. We would like them to be with us to react or to act in a certain manner with us. We have our expectations, but the thing is, we also expect them to know these things without us telling them. And you know what? I mean, this might come as a surprise for you. They cannot read your mind. I don't care how long you've been with your partner. I don't care how much they say they love you. I don't care how much they actually love you. I don't care how many good and nice things they do about you. And I don't even care about what kind of connection you say you have. Let me tell you this. They cannot read your mind. And there's a powerful quote by Dr. John G. Well, not John Gaju, it's Dr. John Gottman. And he says, it's not the lack of love, but the lack of communication that leads to the unraveling of a relationship. And that is the thing. We think if they really love me, They just know what I need. And that is where that fantasy lies. And it's a dangerous one because we think, oh, if they really love me, they know me by now. They know what I like, and I expect them to do so and so. But if you haven't told them, how are they gonna fix it? And actually, from a perspective of a man, and I'm not just saying this from a perspective of a man, but I'm in general, but more so with men, because we don't pay too much attention to things in general. But wouldn't it be so cool? Wouldn't it be so nice to have kind of a blueprint for a relationship? You do this, 1 + 1 is 2. You do this, and the relationship is great. But guess what? Relationships are much more complicated. And when you have all this complexity, when you have all this, imbrication of situation, context, of emotions, of expectations, of nerves and anger and money and everything. When everything combines, man, it's a mess. It can be a mess. And if you don't talk about it in order to straighten things out, to make things flow and to make them navigable, so to say, well, it's going to be a big mess. Because let's be honest, most of us, when we get into a relationship, we're not just walking around saying, hey, just a heads up. These are all the things I expect from you emotionally, physically, and psychologically. I think it'd be useful to have a discussion like this, but from my experience, I haven't seen too many people do that, if any. Because that's where the couples get stuck. And over time, these unspoken expectations build and build and build and build, and they build a wall, and it's a wall of resentment. And you say, okay, it's a wall of resentment. What happens when you have resentment? Well, this resentment builds up, and eventually it will be to remorse. It gets to remorse. Why did I get this guy? And why am I with her? And slowly you add all these emotions up, and they end up to being bitterness. And from bitterness, you get the hate. And I have seen with my own eyes, and I've talked to couples before, separately, of course, like people that are in relationships. And I've heard people saying, I cannot even stand to hear his breathing anymore. I cannot smell him. I cannot be close to him. I cannot let him touch me. And the other way around. I cannot even hear her breathing, man. I cannot hear her eating. So it gets to that point because you add all those frustrations, all those things, and you take it personally because you think they don't want to do it. They don't want to. They don't want to make you happy. They don't want to. They just don't want to do the things that you want in your life. But again, if you don't communicate them, well, how are things going to be solved? And of course, psychologists have studied this dynamic. And according to a survey published by the American Psychological Association, watch this. This is a very, very high number here. Over 60% of couples who break up cite unmet expectations as a major factor. So think about it. About 70% of the couples that break up, they say that they are breaking up because their expectations are unmet. Okay. But here's the kicker. Those expectations were never actually communicated in most cases. And yeah, this is where it gets real. Expectations can bring contempt. And imagine wanting something so badly, but never saying it out loud. And of course, you build that frustration. And before you know it, every little thing your partner does feels like a slap in the face. What I was saying earlier. It feels like a slap in the face, and that's where the relationship breaks down. And come on, let's be honest with us. It's like expecting your partner to know you want flowers on a random Tuesday, but instead they show up with takeout. And you're like, how could you not know that I wanted a dozen roses? Why did you bring me food? It's almost like an emotional scavenger hunt that they didn't sign up for. And trust me, this breaks up relationships. Number 2 on the list, in my opinion, is the sexual disconnect. Yes, we're talking about sex, and more sex, because it is a huge part of dissension, of arguments and fights, and it is a huge part of couples breakup. Why couples break up, but no one really wants to talk about it openly. So here we go. Just I think this morning, no, the other day, I'm on one of these very large groups. I think there's like 1 million people on there too, where people ask for it's a Facebook group, and people ask for advice in relation to their relationships and marriages and things like that. And I have been looking at those messages there, and I was astounded to see that maybe out of 10 messages, maybe 6 of them, 7 of them, that'd be about sex. Oh, he wants to do anal. If I don't do that, he threatened to leave me. That was one that I read this morning. Oh, he wants to bring a third person here. Oh, we only do it once a month. Oh, I want to do it more. He doesn't want it. I want to do it more. She doesn't want it. And it is a lot about sex in there. But, I mean, the problem with it is, and in my opinion, I believe that it's not just about a physical thing, because a sexual connection isn't just about the physical act. It's about intimacy, vulnerability, and communication. But when that connection fades, well, it's like a slow burn that eventually extinguishes the fire altogether. And of course, you don't get the connection. You don't get intimate anymore. Like emotionally, you don't get to talk to the person you love anymore. Of course, the physical it's gonna go away. It's gonna be far. It's gonna break up the relationship, and it gets frustrating, man. And I tell you, there's nothing. I mean, very few things on this planet that can be as hurtful from my personal perspective than being told no when you want to get physical, when you want to have that connection, because it's not even about just the physical. When you want to have those intimate moments with your partner, and you get told no, that is one of the hardest things that I can remember. And I know maybe I'm just a man, but it does hurt, and it creates a lot of frustration. Statistics tell us that sexual dissatisfaction is responsible for about 50% of breakups and divorces in long-term relationships in the US right now. And that is a staggering number, because you think, come on, it's just sex. But to me, it's no surprise seeing what people how people talk about it, and how they complain about it. Yeah, it's no surprise at all. When the bedroom goes cold, so does the relationship. And it's not always about the frequency of sex. Often it's about the emotional disconnect that's happening during sex. And one of the things I do in my practice, one of the things I do when I talk to people, and I want to know how that couple is doing or how bad the relationship is. The first thing I ask them, I don't even ask them, do you guys talk much, or do you fight much? No, I ask them, how's the sex? Hey, how's your sex life? How often do you guys do it? How connected do you feel? Does it feel like a chore? And I just ask them straight away, And I expect people, I emphasize the fact that I want them to be honest. Because that is a barometer. That is a tool, a measuring tool to know how healthy a relationship, if you look at the sex life. Because if the sex is good, and in most of the cases, of course, you'll have sick connections that are twisted in some ways, and like psychologically speaking, that they just based on the physical, and there's no connection between them. But that's like under 1%. But I'm talking about normal connections in relationships. Sex is like this measurement tool for the relationship, because in order to have good sex, you need to have a good emotional connection. You need to communicate, to be open to one another. You need vulnerability. And if you don't have these things, well, guess what? The marriage is not going to be a good one, or the relationship is not going to be a good one, because there's no relationship that can be what we call good, or that can be happy, that both are happy, if there's no vulnerability, if there's no communication, and if there's no emotional connection. And of course, there's the the consumption of this through a physical act, which is wonderful. I don't need to say that because we like that, don't we? So, sex experts like Dr. Laura Bremen, she emphasizes that communication during sex is also a key. And couples who talk openly about their desires and needs are less likely to break up over sexual issues. So what does Dr. Bremen says here is saying here? What is she saying? Well, she's actually saying that in a relationship, and when we're talking just about sex, man, talk about how you want it, okay? Just as simple as that. Talk about it and tell him how you want it. Tell her how you want it, and just, find the middle ground if you cannot fulfill each other's like fully, fantasies they have. But that's what it is, it does help a lot. And that is an act of courage, of vulnerability, of openness, of not being ashamed to talk to your partner exactly, because that's an intimate thing. You wouldn't want to tell anyone just like that, hey, I want to do it this way or that way. No, but that's your loved one. That's your person who you want to make happy, and you're expecting them to make you happy too. And what's Dr. Bremen saying? Yeah, you have to communicate in order to have good sex here. But of course, I'm not going to get too much into sex right now because I want to have an episode, maybe a couple on it, because this is such a huge, beautiful subject that I want us to go deep into and to have a look at. But in a sexual connection, you have to be present emotionally and physically. And I mean, think about it. And I've seen this a lot. And I'm sorry to say this, but most of the women would get to a point where they treat, usually women in a relationship, they get to treating sex like a chore. And it's no wonder that things go downhill. It's like doing the dishes. You're just waiting for it to be over so you can watch Netflix or listen to John podcast or anything else. But trust me, no one wants to beat the dishes in that scenario. If you're thinking of the chore of sex, just like us doing the dishes, man, who wants to beat the dishes? No one wants to. So yeah, that's one thing that we should think about. And when you get to that point, when it feels like the sex becomes a chore, well, you know what? Go talk to your man. Go talk to your woman. And because there's something that happened there. Because something's happened there. And most likely that is a loss of connection. And which leads us to the next point, which is one of the most heartbreaking reasons couples break up, is the slow, painful loss of connection. You don't even realize it's happening until one day you look at your partner, you're in bed, and you just turn around and you look at them and say, man, who's this next to me? You feel like you're staring at a stranger. And this isn't that dramatic blowout. This is quiet erosion. You stop sharing. And you just stop sharing. You don't do it all at once. Maybe you start sharing less, and you start listening less, and you grab your phones and you watch your favorite series. You watch Dr. House, MD, or whatever you're watching, but you stop sharing, and then you stop laughing, and eventually you stop caring, because that's the natural digression, so to say. It's not a progression. You go down. It's going downhill. You stop caring, and what happens is this is where the big breakout happens. When you lose that emotional connection, and psychologists refer to it as emotional distance. Studies show that couples who stop having meaningful conversations are at 70% higher risk of breaking up. So the moment you stop talking to your wife in the morning, or to your partner when you wake up in the morning, before they go to work, when they come back from work, when you give them that little kiss, that little peck on the cheek, that little kiss on the forehead, when you stop talking over breakfast, breakfast is hard, you have kids and you got to rush for work and all of that, but at least, and this is a tip for me, do not ever miss on this. go to bed at the same time. And the moment you stop going to bed at the same time and have those 10 minutes of just you and her, and just her and you and him, and just talk about the day. Hey, babes, how was your day? My day was like this, and I felt like this, and I felt anger, and I felt these things, and I want to do this tomorrow. Just in a few words, and let her talk to you, and let him talk to you, and talk to each other, because again, when you start knowing each other, when you start connecting to each other that way, the risk of breaking up is higher, and it actually happens because you get years go by, and that disconnect, that loss of connection gets so wide that you don't even know who that person is next to you. And it's easy to see why, because when the connection dies, so does the relationship. And the problem with it is because it's gradual and we don't even notice it. Of course, you know the analogy with the with the frog in a boiling pan. You know, if you throw a frog in a pan and the water is cold, and then you turn the heat on, that frog will not even know that what's happening to it until it's boiled and dead. I know that's disgusting. Sorry about that, but it is like that old frog in a boiling water analogy. You don't realize the water's heating up until it's too late. Except in this case, the water is your relationship, and you both slowly becoming frogs. And now nobody wants to be the frog in their own relationship or in their own lives. Which moves us to the next point, which is number fourth reason, the fourth reason I found, and that is external stress. Let's talk about this, which is a little bit less sexy, shall we say. And this is external stress. Yep, and life has a funny way of throwing a wrench into even the strongest relationships. You get work stress, financial stress, family problems, and they all pile up. And if you're not careful, that stress can bleed into your relationship. And I don't need to talk much about it because we all know what it is. You get kids, you get a lot of stress from work, and you know, if we don't be careful, we're gonna be inundated by that, and we're gonna be separated. We're gonna be taken by currents, and we feel like we're in it alone. You have the disconnection, you don't have the sexual connection, you have expectations from partner, and then boom, you get this, which happens in everyone's life today. You get the life stress, and you find yourself alone. And of course, what happens? Well, you break up because the partner is not good anymore. You don't think they're good. They're not good for you. So, in fact, don't worry, you're not alone. About 60%, 64% to be exact, of couples say that stress from work and finances was a significant factor in their breakup. It is not that love just disappears, that just vanishes into thin air. But the relationship becomes a casualty of the life pressures. And if you do not form a team to fight all these things, you will not be able to do it. And I do have an example here for you guys. I mean, I don't know if you know MMA or anything like that, but I've been watching a little bit of MMA in the last few years, and I watched this guy. Probably everyone knows him right now. He's a multimillionaire, Conor McGregor. But this guy, about 10, 12 years ago, he lived in Ireland on welfare. He was just living on benefits. He was making a few £100 a week, a few $100 a week, whatever you want to call it. And the thing is, I was watching this documentary, and his wife was there. She was working full-time while he was training full-time. And what really got me and literally melted my heart was when Devlin, I think her name is Devlin McGregor, she said, "Don't worry, honey, baby," whatever she called him. She says, "I got your back. I'm always in your corner. So no matter what happens, I have your back. No matter what life throws at us, I'm in your corner. And I've seen that woman next to him when they were poor, and you see them now when they have hundreds of millions. And I've seen her with him when he was crying, where he was messing up and whatever, doing stupid things with drugs, whatever. She was always there smiling by his side or crying with him or hugging him. But the thing is, you get that idea when somebody says, I'm in your corner. And that is one of the most beautiful things that I've heard say to me also. No matter what, John, I'm there with you. I'm in your corner. No matter, I will not let anybody talk bad about you. I'll be right there. I got your back. And this is one of the most beautiful things you can ever hear. If you form a team, the life stress has nothing on you. And I want to add another thing here. This is kind of a tip for women. If you want your man, because I've heard this a lot, saying, "Oh, my husband or my hubby, my man is not doing so much, and he's not so good. He's not." Nuh-uh. How about you try and tell him how good he is? How about you try and tell him that I got your back, baby, no matter what happens, and tell him I trust in you. I believe that everything you will do, you'd be successful in. And I'll tell you what happens to me. Screw all the psychology books, screw everything. I'm talking from experience here. When I hear this, I turn into a superhuman. I can do anything, man. I get out of the house, I put my suit on, I get dressed, whatever I do, and I go and I kill it because that woman trusts me and I feel invincible. So, how about you try and do that? And how about you try and say that to your woman? Because your wife, your spouse, not a few there, and there's not a few out there that have trust issues and self-confidence issues, and tell her how beautiful she is. Tell her that she has it. Tell her she's the best mom. Tell her she's the best director. Tell her she's the best at what she does, and you have her back. And see how that transforms her, and how the two of you will form this beautiful, strong team. And I'm telling you, stress, like life stress, doesn't have anything on you, because there's very few connections. There's very few things that are stronger than what a man and a woman can bring and can do together when they are strong together. And the last thing, we're gonna look quickly. What I've noticed also, there's this power struggle. And this is the talk about power. Because as we already know by now, we established that relationships are a delicate dance of give. They're delicate anyways, but they're a delicate dance of give and take. But when that balance shifts, when one person starts to dominate, or worse, when both start fighting for control, that's when things go ugly. And this one has very, very high percentage in terms of how bad it influences breakups. Power struggles are one of the less talked about reasons couples break up, but they are incredibly common. Over 80% of couples report experiencing power struggles at some point in their relationships. This is by the Gottman Institute. This is information from the Gottman Institute. And if they left unchecked, these struggles, they become toxic. And come on, let's be real. No one wants to feel like they're in a tug of war with their partner, because it's exhausting. I mean, relationships are supposed to be a partnership. They're supposed to be a thing about pushing one another to be better, encouraging one another to be better, not to submit somebody else and make them submit to you. And it's definitely not a WWE match, WWE match, whatever that is, wrestling thingy. But sometimes it can feel like you're in the ring fighting for dominance. And guess what? It is not good for your relationship. At the end of the day, the reasons couples break up are complex. And let me tell you this, it's rarely that is just one thing. It's a combination of things. It's a combination of factors like sex, communication, connection, power dynamics, and external stress. But here's the thing. It's not all doom and gloom. Yeah. And put your smile back on. Get that smile back on, because you don't have to wait until it's too late. If you are in a relationship, take a step back and ask yourself, are we talking enough? Are we still connecting on a deeper level? Are we dealing with our issues head on, or are we avoiding the tough conversation? These questions are critical because love isn't just a feeling, it's an action. And most importantly, man, it is a lot of work. And if you're feeling that distance, that slow fade creeping in, don't panic. This is the moment where you get real with your partner and you do what? You talk. You are vulnerable. Be vulnerable. Put the unspoken expectations on the table. Address the intimacy issues and work through the external stress together. And again, the truth is, the best relationships aren't the ones without problems. Well, there's actually none like that. But they're the ones where both people refuse to give up. They choose to fight for each other, so fight for your love. Don't let silence, resentment, or distance win. Remember, a great relationship isn't found. You cannot find it. It's built. You build it. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed it today. And if you have questions, you know how to find me. I know I still have a few of you to reply to. I'm sorry, this week has been hectic and I had lots of messages from you guys. And I do appreciate each and every one of you. And in the next couple of days, I'll reply to all of you. But it is my privilege and my honor to be here with you. And thank you for following me and for joining me on this journey. Until next time, keep pushing forward, keep connecting, and always fight for the love you deserve.